All right, everybody. Welcome back to the Mainly Hoops podcast. We're going to continue covering the Big 12 transfer portal. We've got Texas Tech today. So we'll dive right in. Cody, what do you think about the Texas Tech offseason so far?
I think they did a solid job. I'm not going to say they did a fantastic job. I mean, obviously retaining a guy like JT Toppin, the Big 12 Player of the Year, is probably the best get, or probably the best thing that they did in the portal. Obviously, they lost Darian Williams, which kind of sucks. I wish he would have stuck around and not ended up at NC State. They probably could have paid him fairly close to the same amount. I don't know how much he got. Did he end up getting? What, like $3 million?
Toppin got 4, I think.
What did Williams get?
I'm not sure, but if they only spent 4 on Toppin, I'd like to think they had a couple extra bucks to throw at Williams.
Yeah, and I think
it's scary. It's scary that we're using the word only 4, but
yeah, and I think a lot of these other guys here were kind of more value guys. I guess guys like Donovan Atwell, Tyree Bryan. Maybe they probably threw some money at Lawan Watts, who I think is going to have a lot of responsibility on this offense next season. He's more of a point forward, and I do think there could be talks of like the pick and roll duo of Watts and Toppin, like a 4 or 5 pick and roll being kind of used in the same realm as like Danny Wolf and Vlad Golden last year. I think it could potentially be even better because I think Watts is a little bit of a better decision maker. So yeah, he's going to be interesting. I think he's going to be the swing guy for this offense from a creation standpoint, especially because and they brought Christian Anderson back as well, who had a really good freshman year. I don't think he's really an elite creator. I don't really think he's a true point guard. I think they're going to be running a lot of their offense through, Watts, who's coming from Washington State. Had a high assist rate. He's a high risk, high reward guy at times, makes some iffy decisions out of pick and roll and when he draws two, even out of the post. So I think he's going to be solid. I do think there's going to be some times where, he turns the ball over a few too many times and ultimately could lose this Texas Tech team a few games. But for the other pieces, Grant McCaslin brought in some high floor pieces in Tyree Bryan and Donovan Atwell, who are good floor spacers, good catch and shoot options for this team. They're not going to have a ton of responsibility. They're just more floor spacers for guys like Christian Anderson, Lawan Watts, and JT Toppin to operate, whether that's through the post or Anderson and pick and roll. Because I do think at the end of the day, this team's going to be more of an inside out approach. Like I think Watts is somewhat of a Darian Williams replacement. And yeah, like I said, they're going to be more interior based, and those guys and Bryan and Atwell are going to be more there just for spacing and capitalize when Watts and Toppin do draw two guys. So I do like those additions overall. Nothing crazy, just more floor raising for them.
Yeah, and I think their floor remains high just because obviously you bring back Toppin, who is going to be likely the best player in the league again. So, I think that obviously helps, but it's hard for me to see their ceiling being as high as it was last year with the moves that they made in this year's portal. Obviously, like their losses are pretty significant. McMillan's gone, Overton's gone, Elijah Hawkins is gone, Darian Williams is gone, Kerwin Walton is gone. They lost a lot, and I don't know if that's not going to go like unnoticed. Toppin can mask some of that. They're going to need these transfers, I think, to really help them out. They lost Federico, of course, as well. So this team is going to look quite a bit different with Anderson and Toppin being the guys, and then hopefully something like Watts being able to fill that Williams role. But I don't think like losing Williams is going to hurt, I think, way more than most people are going to think. Because to me, like, especially in the tournament, he really kept them grounded. When the game got tight, like Toppin struggled in a couple of games in the tournament, and Darian Williams really kind of took them home and kept them in the game with tough finishes around the rim. It's just his ability to just create plays as big as he is, but also be able to shoot it, pass it, dribble it the way that he can. Like, we'll talk about NC State, of course, at some point in their video, but that's going to be a great get for them. It's too bad that we couldn't see him back here with Toppin at Texas Tech. So I think it does hurt their ceiling quite a bit with what they've lost. Now, I think, like you said, they've made some like solid portal moves here that help their floor out. But I think it's going to be a very different looking Texas Tech, at least result in terms of their team this year.
Yeah, I think Williams was kind of their veteran leader. His presence on the floor is going to be missed big time.
For sure. Yeah. And I think Watts I think they're very similar in their games. I just think Watts is a much more volatile type of player. I think Watts actually has maybe a little bit more of scoring talent, a little bit more burst than Williams. But yeah, just the turnover issues he had at Washington State with not so high usage. He was playing around some other solid players on that roster and, still kind of threw the ball away a little bit too much. And yeah, at the end of the day, I don't want all that much responsibility on Toppin because I do think he's more of a like pick and roll lob threat, more of like an elite offensive rebounder. You can use him through the post, but he's not a guy that you just dump the ball inside to every time and expect to make plays, especially like when he's playing one-on-one in the post. He's not elite by any means. And when he draws a double, he's not like the greatest passer out of double teams. So I don't love him as like a creator in that aspect, but I do. Yeah. And I do think Watts can soften the blow for the Williams loss. And overall, I'm actually a little bit more worried for the defense because I don't think any of the additions are all that great. Watts is a much worse defender than Williams. Williams is one of the best two-way players in the entire country, so it's really hard to replace that. But Tyree Bryan and Atwell, they have the size on the perimeter to guard twos and threes and be fairly versatile. I just don't really think they guard any particular position all that well. So the perimeter defense, I think, is taking a little bit of a step back. The defense up front would say I think it also takes a step back, losing Williams, with losing that versatility at the 4 position. But adding a guy like Luke Bamgoye from VCU, he's like legitimately a top 3 rim protector in the entire country. He doesn't really do that many other things well, but I mean, he had a 14.5% block rate last season at VCU, which was second in the entire country for guys that played at least 40% of their team's minutes. That's really, he doesn't do much else more than that. He's really not the greatest rebounder just because of his super thin frame. He's like 6'11", maybe 200 pounds, but his wingspan is ridiculous. And he's got a super high vertical. I don't know the exact number, but it's pretty impressive to watch. And especially as like a weak side rim protector, it's really impressive. He'll be a guy that comes in, plays, those spot minutes, 15 to 20 minutes per game. He can play alongside JT Toppin just because of his defensive versatility. He can guard on the wing a little bit, but overall, I do think they got worse on the defensive end. And I think on the offensive end, I think they did I don't think they got better, but I do think the Watts move softened the blow a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. Defensively, not as high of upside. Do you think, like, shooting wise, I'm a little bit worried about that. I mean, Christian Anderson, very volatile last year. In the tournament, especially in the big moments, he's 5 for 25 from 3 in the 4 tournament games, including a 1 for 8 and a 1 for 6 in their first 2 games of that tournament. I'm worried about like him just being a ghost on the offensive end at times. Seemed like in those tournament games, he just, like, you didn't even notice him. He just disappeared. And then when the ball came to him, he struggled. Granted, he was only a freshman, so I would expect a leap. But he doesn't have any of those guys around him anymore.
Yeah. I mean, I think McCaslin did a decent job replacing the shooting that they lost. They lost Kerwin Walton, Hawkins, who didn't really shoot it all that well. Like Williams was 34% shooter, not elite. He did a lot of other things really well. And then Overton as well, who shot it okay. But Atwell and Bryan, they're not like elite shooting talents. They're more just like, if they're going to get an open look, they're probably going to knock it down at like a 40 to 45% clip. And again, that comes down to the creation, the advantage creation of Christian Anderson and Lawan Watts, whether that's Anderson in the pick and roll, even Watts in the 4-5 pick and roll, or being able to create double teams through the post and with his burst off the dribble in isolation from the top of the key. But overall, like, I don't see those guys getting run off screens like a guy like Chance McMillan. Like, he was one of the most talented shooters in the entire country. Like, a guy like Donovan Atwell, not really going to be able to replace that. He's just doesn't have the shooting talent on the move to be able to replicate what McMillan did.
No, that's my concern with them. So, like, to me, it feels like they got worse on both ends. Now I think that they can limit it a little bit, just because I think McCaslin's a great coach and Toppin can mask it, just being, one of the best players in the country. So, I think Texas Tech will still be all right, but I think that, like, both their floor and ceiling are much lower.
Yeah, it was going to be harder for them to really improve on either side of the ball, just with how well they played, especially down the stretch last year. And McCaslin always does a good job of bringing in these more versatile wings that can play both sides of the ball and at least raise the floor. It's just a matter of where the ceiling is and where, like, the true star power is outside of JT Toppin. I think that's the question coming into next season for them.
All right, a lot of roster changes for the Red Raiders. We'll wrap things up. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll be back with some more Big 12 content next week.